All right. Good morning, everybody. My name is Jason Flame, and welcome to our special edition of Master Motivation today. And I am just almost in disbelief that I have Ernie Reyes Jr. here on the show. Truly, it is an honor, sir, to have you here today. So thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Jason.
Hey, um, I have watched you as I'm 46. I think we're pretty close in age. And I remember as a kid, my very first time hearing of Ernie Reyes Jr. was a show called Sidekicks. And that was my very first time seeing you. And then came, The Last Dragon, another one of my favorites. And then so many more, right? Um, but when we met in person, I remember a distinct time that we were at the Super Show and we were sitting down at the Maya booth, and it was me and you and Bill Clark. And I'm just sitting there going, is this real? Like, this is a guy that I've looked up to and have seen so many times. And here I am just having a casual conversation. And now here I am interviewing you. So definitely a privilege and an honor.
Thank you, man. Thanks again.
So I just want to kind of dive in and talk. I know we got about 30 minutes and there's going to be some questions and people may want to talk about different things, but
Yeah.
what was it like growing up in the martial arts family? Because you obviously come from a very high profile martial arts family, part of the West Coast demo team. Your father is just a legend as well. So what was that like growing up?
I mean, it was awesome. I've been lucky to kind of see the evolution of martial arts in America, like up front, close and personal, from the late 70s to where we are now. So it's yeah, about 40 years of just martial arts, from the tournament scene to full contact karate to the birth of MMA, and it was awesome. That period of time growing up when I was say 8 years old, competing, traveling with the West Coast demo team, competing at all the major tournaments. Um, it was a really special time. You'd only kind of see that now looking back in retrospect, right? Because so many life uh, situations have come up more recently that kind of put you in a has put me in a constant state of reflection, right, for quite some amount of time now. So you have the opportunity to think back about all those times, and it was just a great moment in time. It was very pure. There was no end result that really anybody could foresee other than, showing up and competing. And it wasn't like there was fame and fortune at the end of this road. There was nothing there. It was just what we had in the tournaments, the competition, and then the day to day life. I grew up as a huge Bruce Lee fan. Partly because of my dad being an inspiration to me, like a lot of sons are to when they look at their fathers. Mine happened to do martial arts, and then my hero that I would see in the movies was Bruce Lee, and so like kind of everything was just perfect in terms of like, hey, this is my goal. I want to be like this guy. And guess what? My dad is a martial arts instructor, is a teacher. He's in it 100%. So I got to live that dream. As a young kid, I was like, prided myself on just being a real martial artist. That's all we had, right? And so it was the training every day. And then we got to do, demonstrations. And that was like more of the fun part of it all, right? It's just entertaining the crowds, inspiring the crowds, traveling, competing. It was a great time. It really was. And it really, set the foundation of all the stuff that we're seeing nowadays.
And as a lifelong martial arts myself, I have a son who is 16 now, and he's trained in martial arts, and it's very unique that that relationship of a father-son martial artist. Um, was your dad like extra hard on you? Did you feel like maybe you took a little extra heat from students? That kind of thing. I mean, I talk about this with other martial artists, with having their dad be their trainer. What
I
was that like?
Yeah, I mean, my dad was supremely committed to making everybody at the school the best that they could possibly be. So that was our mindset. You know, it was that we were being pushed to be our best. And so it, like all great coaches, right? That means
Right.
pushing people beyond their comfort zones, right? If you're just cruising along comfortably, most likely you're not going to be the guy that's chasing greatness, right? It doesn't matter what sport it is, it doesn't matter what it is. It's hard work no matter what you do if you want to excel and be the best, at what you do. So, there was a tremendous amount of discipline, right? That went into our lifestyle. And my dad still upholds that same kind of discipline today. 75 years old, and lots of different, you know, just lots of different challenges being at that stage of, your life. And he does it the same way he does everything, which is like full commitment, right? And keeping in mind, trying to give value to other people, along the way.
And something that I've always noticed is, and something that I've always appreciated and loved about watching the West Coast demo team, just watching your performances. I mean, a number of years we would watch you perform at the Martial Arts Super Show, hosted by Century, and there was always a little bit of every element of the martial arts. It wasn't just the flashy kicking. There was always some sparring, kickboxing. Then you got a Screama Kali. There was just a little bit of everything, which to me is what a well-rounded martial artist should be and is. And so you had the opportunity to train in different styles, so to speak, and do a lot more because your roots are in Taekwondo, correct?
Correct.
And then was it your father that wanted to bring in all of these other things? Like what was the drive to have so many different aspects
Yeah,
in your
yeah, I believe so. We started our base is Taekwondo, so that's where we get all the kicking, right? Kicking and footwork. And so, but it was pretty early on. I mean, we weren't even out of the 80s. I mean, we weren't even out of the 70s when like boxing, was part of what we were doing, right? And that's not, especially not at that time period. Taekwondo guys didn't box, right? That's like more now. Everybody does everything, but
right.
back then it was like, hey, you did karate, you did taekwondo, you did whatever you did, kung fu, and that's what you did. Nowadays it's about acquiring knowledge and what can make you the best martial artist. But my dad, even back then, had this idea of being a well-rounded martial artist. You know, and mind you, this is like the generation right after Bruce Lee. So he introduced that idea, right? You don't have to be a karate guy. You don't have to be a taekwondo guy. You don't have to be a judo guy. You can use whatever is useful to you on all those things and then throw
Right.
out everything else that isn't useful. And then you basically have your own way, basically, right?
Yeah.
So we were automatically boxing. We went, taekwondo. That was just in the beginning. Then it was right away we were boxing, kickboxing, wushu, the introduction to Filipino martial arts, right, with Remy Presas and some of that generation of people. Um, and so it was always that. I think my dad's idea was, and I remember him saying, it's like, we should be able to adapt to any style, meaning that a taekwondo guy has a certain way of moving. A karate guy has a certain way of moving, especially the ones that compete on a high level in any of those things, right? They stand a certain way, they hold their hands a certain way, they kick a certain way, right? And so he wanted us to be able to adapt to any style
Right.
and pick up. So like a hard style, doing a soft style, especially in the late 70s, early 80s, was not, was not something that you saw
Right.
often. Then you have, of course, all these forms competitors that have come way after, right? That began to Carmichael Simons of the world and that kind of thing, where we were doing, broadsword, and then we're doing our Taekwondo form, and it was the beginning of all of that.
Right.
But the whole point is that you could pick up on anything, so we could adapt to any style. You want to do wushu, we can do wushu. If you want to do Taekwondo, we can do Taekwondo. If you want to do boxing, we can do boxing, right? And so that was his idea.
Yeah.
It was always, hey, and if you want to get into one of those things and dive deeper, in towards mastery of that, you will. It won't be like, oh my God, you're trying to teach this Taekwondo guy how to punch. Good luck. Because that was pretty much the idea at that point. There was very few people that did cross training, and everybody's, like I said, structure was based around whatever their style was, traditional style. So
right.
This, boxing, stand with my hands down, Taekwondo, whatever it is. So.
Let me throw this question out there, because this was something that I was gonna talk about. Many people don't know that you fought full contact. You have, I believe, a 3-0 record. And a friend of mine, Chris Lutton, wanted to ask. He says, "Good morning, Mr. Reyes. Are you still competing in kickboxing competitions, and what would you like to do next?"
No. I mean, it still always crosses my mind, because once you go in that direction, you always feel like you can, and you should. That's what fighters should feel like, right? Doesn't always mean that you're right, but you should feel it. So I always there, and I train with, lots of great people all the time too. So that makes a difference. But yeah, no kickboxing. I'm almost 50 years old.
Right.
Usually kickboxing. But the training continues to evolve, right? More recently, I'd say probably the last 7-8 years, I got into Sayak Kali, a form of Filipino martial arts. I was doing a show on NCIS LA with Dave Kalstein, who's executive producer, one of the executive producers and writers of the show. And he wrote an episode called The Frozen Lake, about a Gurkha who's a knife expert, and Rafael Kayanan, who's a martial arts, a master Filipino martial artist, and also just artist who's done stuff for DC and Marvel, that kind of thing, reached out to me. And at the time, I wasn't even really pursuing acting at all. I was kind of had a young family in tow and was trying to figure out how I was going to survive, having just grown up in the entertainment business. And it's like, now you have things that life is just different, totally different structure, right? And that was a huge transition. Yeah, so as we were prepping for the episode of NCIS LA, I met Tuan Raf, and I did a seminar on the tomahawk, and I was just like instantly sold. It was at the perfect time in my life, where, you're looking for that next evolution, even if you're not like consciously looking. And then, there it is. And so I've been doing that for about 7-8 years now. Yeah, it's been amazing. It's kind of funny how it comes full circle. We were Taekwondo guys originally, Korean martial art, right? And so to be here now after 40 years of martial arts training, kind of zeroing in on Filipino martial arts as something to practice and to create my discipline around, right? Where I'm not having to worry about doing 720s or any kind of crazy stuff like that. That doesn't make sense for me anymore, right? I don't get the joy out of doing that kind of stuff. Well, I probably can't do it anymore, but besides that, it's like it's more practical for where I'm at in my life right now.
All right. Well, let's back up a little bit because something that I'm curious about is, you had been involved in martial arts as probably from birth, right? How did you get involved with the movie industry? How did you get involved?
Yeah, so we were traveling, our lifestyle was basically every weekend we'd go travel to a national tournament. While we were at the tournament, we would also be asked to perform at the nighttime finals. So pretty much all the demo team members were competing during the day. We were doing demos at night and competing. And we were doing that for a handful of years before we even got into films and television. And we were doing a demo in Las Vegas, and we did our thing, and the crowd's going crazy. And a lady comes up to my dad and is like, "Does he speak English?" And she was the lady who eventually became my manager, and really was her. I mean, I think the dream was already there because of Bruce Lee, right? So everybody in that time period, everybody wanted to be like Bruce Lee, and the movies was part of it, right? And so, but without, her name's Sally Baker, by the way, amazing lady, big time Hollywood vet. When we got there, which was like in the early 80s, right? She had already been in Hollywood for 20 years, doing children's programming and all kinds of stuff. So she was really the driving force in making that reality, happen. It's pretty crazy to think about, but it's a happen chance. And, through that meeting, she got me into The Last Dragon, which was then spun off into co-creating with Disney a TV show, but it was really her understanding of Hollywood, how it works, what it takes to be a great manager. It's not like she had a whole bunch of clients; it was just me. And she made it happen. We had to deliver, of course, but we had already spent our young life, training and being ready for that moment. We weren't in doubt about entertaining people with our martial arts.
What would you say is your most memorable experience? What movie or series that you were involved in? What really stands out as something that's most memorable for you?
I mean, there's so many different time periods, because I had The Last Dragon and Sidekicks. That was when I was like a kid, right? And then by the time we were doing, Sidekicks was up into my, starting my teenage years, but it was over. I mean, the show was based around me being a little kid, not a teenager, right? And then we have a whole nother time period, which is a handful of years later after that, Last Dragon and Sidekicks, which was the Ninja Turtles. And that was like an amazing time period. Not only because of working on the movies and being super successful, but the impact that it made in the actual martial arts industry as a whole.
Right.
Okay? People were signing up. If you had a martial arts school around that time, there was not a lot of work you had to do to market. Families were coming into the school wanting to sign up, right? So and to be part of it was awesome. I saw it in my dad's schools, and I saw it all around the country.
Oh yeah.
Because at that point, we were opening martial arts schools. People would fly me out. They'd do a grand opening, and 100 signups later, they had a grand opening. Thank you very much. Awesome, and we were off to the next city.
Right.
So there were so many different time periods. And then another 15 years after that, you have like the rundown, which is a real marking of time for me, because I've been training martial arts my whole life, and it goes in waves, right? You're a champion, you're like at the top of your game, right? Then now you're growing up, and now you're a teenager, and now everything's not feeling the same, and you're tighter, and you kind of like go down, right? And then you work your way back up. You're like, okay, now I'm in Ninja Turtles too. Now I'm like peaking again, right? Skills are back, stretched out, feeling good, on top of my game, right? Then you're going into your 20s again, right? Things change, whatever, whatever. So by the time I hit, early 30s, which is where the rundown was, there's a big time period from Ninja Turtles and Surf Ninjas to the rundown that nobody sees any of that. We didn't have social media. That's 3 days, 3 times a day working out for like a decade plus, just holding on to the dream of what I'm doing, making sure that when my opportunity came, that I would deliver. Right? And so 15 years, no movies. It was a different time period, It's already been another 15 years since the rundown, right? So, that was a big moment for me. Of course, working with The Rock, who's gone on to become the biggest movie star in the world, right? But to have that moment and have that fight scene, and it was an ensemble piece, of course. But, I definitely had my moments in that fight scene where I felt like, this is all my life's work is basically culminating in this, right? And so that was a huge moment. But then you go through life and it's like, and then again, you go down after that, right? Now you're in your 40s. You're like, shit, right? And you're trying to find a way to continue to evolve, right? To continue to get to that place. And like I said, the Filipino martial arts has come in big time for me, in so many different ways. Weapons-based system. I have done commas and stuff like that, but not, a whole mindset that's developed around a weapons-based system, right? It's different. When you do taekwondo or you do kickboxing or whatever, it's different. It's a different mindset. You do Muay Thai, you have to have a different mindset than the taekwondo guy.
Of course.
Right? And so you get to weapon-based system, now your mind changes completely. Because it's like kick or punch, 200 pounds, all these things, jiu-jitsu, are they going to grab me or whatever. Well, now we have answers for all those questions.
Right.
You don't want to roll around doing jiu-jitsu with me if I'm holding a blade. So
probably not a good idea.
Now where does the training go, right? And I have a lot of friends who are high-level jiu-jitsu people, and I love jiu-jitsu. It's awesome. But I'm just saying it changes your mind. So, it's 40 years and I have had, as people may know, kidney failure 5 years ago. So I've been like jockeying to get a transplant for this time. Major challenges, life challenges. My point sharing in any of this is that, when you're on a lifelong pursuit of fulfilling your dreams, it doesn't happen overnight. It's not like, hey, this year. I think a lot of times we our expectations of what we can accomplish in 1 year is like, we think we can do this.
Right.
But in reality, the years just comes and goes. But what we underestimate is like what we can do in 10 years. So it's like, put your mind towards that. Whatever you're trying to accomplish, if you can do it in a year, it's like, okay, put your mind towards 10 years. You're going to actually you're going to cover a lot of ground if you can commit to that level of mastery towards whatever you're doing, right? So I'm happy to be where I'm at right now. Life is handing me lots of challenges, but I do my best, and believe me, this is like, a constant battle. But, with inside of those challenges are tremendous opportunities to grow, to evolve, to change, because otherwise you wouldn't. Like if I wasn't on dialysis 3 times a week for 5 years, I wouldn't have contemplated the things that I've been contemplating. Impossible. right? I'm healthy, I'm running around, I'm busy, I got things to do, I got bills to pay, I'm just too busy. But when you have to sit down, time out, sit down here 3 times a week for 4 hours, where do you go? What does your mind think about? And this is the one thing that I'll say about the gratitude I have for my dad and the martial arts teaching that he's giving me is that all of the motion is great. All the moves, all that is awesome. But really what's most important is that when you get into scenarios where life is really testing you, that's when all the training comes to the surface, right? Because, hey, you've learned, right, certain ways of being that in the midst of the challenges, hey, this is what I got to do. This is how I got to be in order to face and overcome these challenges and not just give in and go dark side, right? Which is really easy to just go negative. We see it all around us, especially more recently. So much negativity, so much darkness, right? And through martial arts training, it's allowed me to have a different perspective, to be able to fight and break through the challenges, no matter how hard they may be. Maybe you won't even accomplish them, but you'll have spent your life, right? And you're okay with that, right? So that's what it's all about for me. It's just living a good life, and showing my kids, what it is that my life has been about, just like my dad. We're a filmmaking family at the core of it. My daughter, more recently was one of the leads in the Netflix film We Can Be Heroes. And that movie has went on to be Netflix's most popular movie of all time, by leaps and bounds, which means basically kids are watching it over and over and over and over again. And so, we are living generations now in films and television like we've been doing with the martial arts. So it's a great time to be alive. There's a tremendous amount of opportunity. The things that people like yourself are doing, where they're beginning to migrate online and aggregate and build communities much larger than what you could do being in your local area. Having the mindset of, well, I'm just in my local area. It's like, no, now you're all over the world. So what's your message, right? How can you share? If you have some sort of knowledge that you want to share in your local community, like Burbank or Moore Park or San Jose or wherever, if you have something to share there and people are finding that to be beneficial, right, to their families and their lives, then there's an audience for you online as well. And it's more than 10x whatever your audience currently is dealing with your local area. So it's an exciting time, although it's challenging, right? And there's going to be a lot of people that fall by the wayside, fortunately or unfortunately. But my perspective of 2020 and beyond is a great time. It's better than ever before in terms of the opportunity to succeed, right? That's just my point of view. Other people might have a different point of view. But, like I said, I came into Hollywood when it was like, hey, we're here at guards at the gates. Nobody's getting in. Now it's just YouTube, Netflix.
Right,
Right
all
there.
over, all over.
Anywhere you want to be. So it's a great time. I'm grateful for my martial arts and how it's affected me as a person. And it's always happening. Listen, talk to me 2 years ago, it's a different thing. Talk to me 6 months ago, it's a different thing. Talk to me 3 weeks ago. Things change, and so here I am. There's a lot of opportunity, things that I can't talk about necessarily even. But, sometimes you go from being the kid to being the old man, right? And that's okay, right? Because it happens to everyone, right? So it's a great time for me to be who I am with the history and the legacy that I have, and that I'm part of. And yeah, I think that from in my mind, the best is yet to come.
I love
That's
it.
my thought. Oh, sidekicks and all these different things. You were cool in the '90s. Now you're, you know what I mean, not relevant until you are again, right? Until you are again, right? Karate Kid, Cobra Kai, that was irrelevant too, all through the '90s, 2000, 2010s, right? But it's relevant again, right? And so things come back full circle. And from my perspective and my opinion, based upon the things that I know that I'm creating and the things that I know I'm involved with, I believe that the best is yet to come when it comes to, you know, everything that I've been doing anyway.
Well, I truly appreciate all of your, all of that wisdom, because that comes with not only time and age, but it also comes with experience, and experience kind of trumps everything. And you've had a heck of experience over the last several years. And so again, I appreciate you sharing that with all of us. And I want to respect your time, because I know we're cutting it short here. But if anybody has any questions that you want to ask Mr. Reyes really quick before we go, please just drop that in the comment. Once again, thank you so much for sharing it. I'm a huge, by the way, I had to ask, and I'm glad you touched on it, but man, I'm a huge rock fan.
Yeah,
And when you got to be in the rundown, I mean, what was is he really as cool as he seems to be?
The Rock's a great guy, you know, and from where he was to where he is now, you know, that didn't happen by accident, right? That takes a lot of hard work. It took a lot of hard work for him to get to where he was 20 years ago when we did that movie, right? And but it took a lot of hard work to get to where he is now, and I'm sure he's going to do a lot more amazing things in the future. So, you know, he's somebody that I always hung on to that moment that I had with him in the rundown, even some of my more darker times. Why? Because I would look up and I'm like, damn, The Rock's killing it. And no matter what, for me, anyways, continues to help drive me to go, no, I'm not ever giving up. You know what I mean? You just got to keep going. And that's my advice to everyone. It's like, you just can't, you got to have an indomitable spirit. We all know that.
Right?
Perseverance. Never quit. Never give up. Well, you can say that if you're like, oh, it's going to take you 2 or 3 years. But if you tell somebody, hey, it's going to take you 20, 30 years, right? A lot of times people will back away from that
Yeah.
challenge. Right?
Yep.
What? It's going to take me 20 years? Yeah, 20 years to achieve everything that you ever wanted to achieve in life and then be there to enjoy it. Yeah, it should take you 20 years, you know. And so, you know, maybe I'm a turtle. Maybe I move a little slower. But I feel like we're getting close to the Derek Frater. There's my man, Derek Frater. Yeah, and I got to go in like 1 minute. But the
Okay, we'll cut
rundown,
it off.
I was doing an all plant-based diet. That was
That's
it.
it.
What was working for me, but I was a vegetarian for, you know, years when I'm growing up, so it worked for me. Anyways, listen, I gotta run, but listen, maybe we'll set a time, some other time, you know, to continue our conversations.
Would love
And
it.
I know that there's a lot of stuff that people want to cover in a short period of time, but it was great talking to you today. And
Yep.
stay in touch, you know, and you know, maybe we'll do another little 30 minutes somewhere soon down the road.
Absolutely. I would love to do it. Thank you so much for your
All right,
time. Have a great day. We'll see
all
you
right,
soon.
all
All right,
right.
guys. Thank you all for tuning in. Appreciate you asking some questions, and you heard it here. Mr. Reyes and I will get on for another 30-minute discussion at a later date. So here we go, guys. We're going to close out with the video. Have a great week, and we'll see you next Monday with Mike Chat.